I absolutely love romance in all the books that I read. So today I thought that I could share with you all of my romance recommendations. So like I said, I enjoy romance in all the books that I read. It doesn't have to be a romance book. It can be sci-fi, fantasy, you know, every other genre. It doesn't have to be a romance book. And my opinion is that romance can often make a fantasy or sci-fi book better. So I don't think I'm the only one who thinks this way, so therefore I will be sharing some sci-fi, some contemporary romance, some adult romance, and fantasy romance. All about the romance. And hopefully you will get to hear about books that you haven't read before or haven't heard anything about before. So let's get into the video. So I'm starting off with sci-fi because I realized I do have a lot of sci-fi favorites that have a strong focus on romance. So here I have Diabolic by S.J. Kincaid. So in this sci-fi world we follow a Diabolic. A Diabolic is a human-looking creature who has human DNA, who looks human, but is programmed to only care about the master's well-being. So essentially, wealthy families in this world buy Diabolics to protect their children or protect themselves because they're killer machines. So we follow a Diabolic, like I said, and she is called Nemesis. And after an unfortunate series of events, she is forced to go to the Emperor's palace and be held hostage by this Emperor, who is said to be very brutal and mean. And at the Emperor's palace she is forced to hide her true nature and maybe realize that the Emperor is not that bad. I remember loving the romance in this book, and I strongly remember in the end of this book there were so many secrets that were yet to be told about the love interest and about the whole politics, and I just think this is a really great YA sci-fi romance for anyone who is looking for, one, a great sci-fi world with, in my opinion, a unique plot, and then also for a great romance. Then I want to talk about Illuminae by Jake Kristoff and Amy Kaufman, the first one in the Illuminae files. I have the second two books on my shelf, I have read all of them. If you're looking for gripping characters for a unique sci-fi world with plot twists and great relationships and just an overarching great plot through a trilogy, I would really recommend this series and the first one. This is told through multiple different media, like through emails, through chat, through like camera recordings, and I just remember being totally immersed in the story when I read this. It was so fun to be flipping through the pages and not expecting what to see on the next one. So this follows two main characters, Ezra and Katie. In the beginning of the book they have a kind of complicated relationship, and throughout this book they uncover secrets together about the society. It's kind of like a second chance romance, so if you enjoy that, this is for you. I think I enjoyed the romance in the second one, Gemina, most. But like, you have to read this in order to read Gemina, so just read the whole series in my opinion, it's great. And I must say that this book has the best written AI I have ever read. So pick this up if you want to read a fun, galactic adventure. That sounds really lame. But it takes place on a spaceship and in space rather than just on a planet. And I found that really refreshing, you might say. As well as the romance. The romance was just grabbed my soul, in a sense. So yeah, the Illuminae files. I can't get over how creative I think this book is and how creative the authors had made this book with the different medias, and I hear the audiobook is great. I haven't listened to it, but the audiobook has like all these little sound effects and a different voice for every character. It's supposed to be great, so I highly recommend that also, but I just think it's so fun to read this with your eyes because it's so much hidden in the pages and just, it's great. So the next series I'm gonna be talking about is a series that many have read already and many love, but I just feel like I need to be talking about it a bit more because I absolutely loved it. I have reread this series like 3 times, or the first one I have read multiple times and the second one also. Let me tell you, I don't reread books, so that should tell you a lot, I think. That is Cinder by Marissa Meyer. This is the first book in the Lunar Chronicles. The second one is called Scarlet, the third one is called Crest, which I have here, and then I have Winter beside it. This is actually the Swedish cover. They have like dolls on the cover, which I thought was very unique and fun, and I absolutely love these covers. If you follow me on Instagram, you have already seen these. So if you haven't gotten an idea of what this series is about from these covers, it's retellings of fairy tales. So in this book we follow Cinder, and this is a retelling of Cinderella. And Scarlet, I don't know if you saw that she was wearing a red cloak, red hood. That's a retelling of Little Red Riding Hood, and Cress is a retelling of Rapunzel. And what's the fourth one a retelling of? Snow White. I just remembered because it's an apple on the cover. So like I just said, it's a retelling of fairy tales, and I absolutely love the original fairy tales. I'm a big fairy tale fan. This book follows Cinder, and she is a cyborg. If you don't know what a cyborg is, it essentially means that some parts of the human body has been replaced with like mechanical parts and robot parts, you can say. And we have characters from the original Cinderella in this book, a bad stepmother, sisters, an amazing sidekick. So this takes place on Earth in New Beijing. And there's also people on the moon. I feel like I don't make this book justice, but in this world, people live on the moon. Or not people, lunar people. So the people living on the moon, the lunar people, have magic. So the lunar people is at war with Earth. Or it's a fragile, very fragile peace between the two. And as this book takes place, a new disease is making its way through the streets and killing a bunch of people, and they kind of suspect the lunar people for creating this disease. Anyway, this is absolutely an amazing Cinderella retelling. I recommend all of these books, and I think Winter was an amazing conclusion to the series. I don't know, I have just been talking about the sci-fi stuff, but in each and every book of these, we follow a different main character, and they have a different love interest. All the relationships is really different, and I love all the romantic interests. I think my favorite romance is in either Cress or Winter or Scarlet. I did really enjoy the romance in this as well, but I think Cress or Scarlet or Winter, one of those three is my favorite. And I think when I was younger and reading this, there was so much mystery about this, and just uncovering all of these secrets with these characters, it was just really fun, and I absolutely would recommend this to everyone. So now I'm going to be talking about my fantasy romance book recs. And first off, I have the Graceling Realm trilogy, or it actually isn't a trilogy. There is a fourth book which came out in January, so it's already out. We have Graceling, which is the first book, then we have Fire, which is the second book, and then we have Bitter Blue, which is the third book, which I thought was the last one. But we also have Winterkeep, which is the new one. All of these follow different characters with different love interests, and all of the romantic relationships is really different in each and every one of them. First, we have Graceling. This follows Katza, which is a Grace. A Grace is someone who is really great at something. Not everyone in this world is a Grace, but it's a power that lets you be really good at something. It could be anything like baking or writing or singing, but we follow Katza, and her Grace is killing. She is great at killing, and therefore the king in her kingdom is trying to take advantage of her power and use her, essentially. So this is a fantasy romance, which means that the romance is the most important thing in the story, you could say. But it also has a really great world and the overarching plot in all of these three books, because it takes place in the same world, kind of. So I think Kristin Cashore, I didn't even say her name, the author, but I think Kristin Cashore did a really great job with the world building as well as the romance. Katza, together with a new character, Poe, that we get to meet early on in the book, they uncover mysteries together, and there's a lot behind closed doors that has taken place in these kingdoms, and they are trying to solve these mysteries together so that there can be peace in the kingdom. I read this a very long time ago, so my memory of it may not be that great, but I really enjoyed this. I do actually think that Fire, which is the second book, is my favorite. This takes place in a different kingdom than the first one. The magic in this is also a bit different. In this kingdom there's monsters, and there can be human monsters which can manipulate and read other humans' minds. And the thing about these monsters that stand out from the rest of the humans is that they have really colorful hair, for example. So Fire has very strong red hair. And there's also animal monsters which can also control minds, and they are very colorful. So the monsters essentially is very colorful in this world. and we follow her, a human monster, and she's daughter of the most vile human monster there ever was, essentially. So in this book we follow her as she tries to just live her life in this world that wants to harm her, essentially. I won't say anything more about this. I think you should really pick this series up if you haven't. And I will also recommend watching Regan from Peruse Project. I can't even say her channel name, but I will link her channel below. She recently put up a reading vlog while reading all of these books, and I think she does a very great job at explaining these books, a way better job than I did. So I will link her channel and the video down in the description if you want to check her out. But I think that this series is really great if you want to get started with fantasy romance, and I just feel like I need to reread these ASAP in order to read Winterkeep, which is a new one. Then I have Strange the Dreamer by Laini Taylor, but I feel like Strange the Dreamer and Muse of Nightmares is such fun fantasy romance. We follow Laszlo Strange, and he is working on this amazing, great, big library, and he has kind of this obsession with this lost city that no one has ever seen. And then one day when he is working in the library, these people show up, and they're riding on these mystical beasts, and they are talking a different language and saying that they come from this place that Laszlo Strange has been obsessed with his whole life. So we follow Laszlo Strange as he uncovers secrets about this world, he meets new people, he gets to know more about himself. And in this book we also follow Sarai, which is another character, and Laszlo and Sarai get to know each other, and their relationship grows into this beautiful, heartwarming relationship, and I just absolutely adore this whole book because it's so magical, it's beautifully written, and as well as the romance is beautifully written. And the ending made me cry. And I do think that if you want something beautifully written, something magical, and a great romance on top of that, I think you should pick up Strange the Dreamer and Muse of Nightmares by Laini Taylor. So the last of my fantasy romance recommendation is The Remnant Chronicles. This series follows a girl named Leah, and in the first book she is found in a situation she doesn't particularly like. She's forced to marry the king of the neighboring kingdom, and she doesn't really like this that much, so she runs away on her wedding day with her maid, or like they're very great friends. And then we also follow two different perspectives, one who has also run away at the same time that Leah has, and one that is meant to kill her. And I don't know if I was just stupid when reading the first book, but I couldn't tell which of these two new characters, which of them were which. I don't know if they said any names in the first chapters from those perspectives, but I couldn't tell which was which. And then when I realized which was which, my mind was blown. I don't know if I was just stupid or if that's a thing that Mary E. Pearson did intentionally. So after she runs away, she gets to this amazing, beautiful town, and she starts to get to know all of these new characters and finding her place there. But then she also has to run away because someone is always trying to kill her. This book is truly amazing, and I don't love this series because of the romance. I thought the romance was very good, don't get me wrong. It is on this list for a reason. But the lore and the backstory of this world was amazing, and we had to see that a lot more in the other two books in the series. I absolutely adored both of these books as well. And the ending of this series, my heart. You should read this not just because of the romance, but also because the amazing world building, the lore, the religions, and also amazing character work. I absolutely loved Leah as a main character, and her maid best friend, and also the love interest. Everything about this book was great. I think I gave every book like 5 stars. I read this whole series in like 2 weeks, and I'm a slow reader. Then, because I don't read much YA contemporary romance, I just have 2 books on this list. And they're not just focused on the romance, it's also focused on the development of these characters and, I don't know, amazing character developments and the hard-hitting contemporary YA just finding their place in the world, I guess. The first one is called Everything Everything by Nikolaj June. This is the Swedish cover and also the movie edition cover. I think I've seen the movie before I read the book even, I think. So we follow the main character, Madeleine, and she has a very uncommon disease which makes her allergic to the world and everything in the world. She lives inside her home with her mother and a caretaker, I think you would call her. And she's quite content with living like this until a new family lives in next door and she meets this guy and they start like riding on the glass, and then they meet and a lot of things happen from this. But it was such a beautiful book about finding yourself, and I don't know, it was beautiful. I think a lot of people has already read this book. I don't really remember that much about it because I read it like 4 or 5 years ago, but I also think that the movie is worth watching. I don't know, I think it's beautiful. Then I have adult contemporary and adult historical fiction, because I have just read one historical fiction that I really enjoyed, and I think that should be on this list as well. And then I only have 2 books, adult contemporary romances, that I really enjoyed. I gave both of these 5 stars. So the first one is Josh and Hazel's Guide to Not Dating by Christina Lauren. This is an author duo. This follows Josh and Hazel, and they're kind of enemies. They don't like each other, and the whole premise of this book is that they both are single and they have this challenge to pick out like blind dates for each other and go on double dates together. But throughout this whole process they start developing feelings for each other. It's just really cute. The only thing that I didn't like about this book was the ending, because I thought that was really abrupt and I didn't really feel like the ending was very fit for the characters, I guess. But with that said, it was such a cute and lovable story, and I really enjoyed the enemies to lovers trope in this book. Then I have Me Before You by Jojo Moyes. This is the Swedish edition, which is why it looks like this. This broke my like 14-year-old heart. I watched the movie first because it was so popular. I saw it everywhere and I wanted to be part of the gang, you know. I wanted to have seen it, and that movie broke my heart. And then I wanted to read the book because we had it at home. My mother has read it. It was so heartbreakingly beautiful. And I know there's other books in this series following the same character as in this book, but I haven't gone around to read those because I'm still stuck with this book. So we follow Lou Clark, and she is such a fun main character. She loves fashion and she lives in this very small town, and her fashion isn't like the thing that everybody else wears. So she is viewed as very different in this town, but she has a hard time finding a job. So in the beginning of this story she's trying to find a job, and this very wealthy family that lives just outside of the town has a son which is in a wheelchair. So she goes on a interview to become the caretaker for, not the caretaker but like the assistant for Will Trainer, which he is called, and he is very grumpy and very mean to her in the beginning. But then they start to get to know each other a lot more, and it just becomes this beautiful relationship, and just, oh, my heart. I wouldn't recommend this if you want to read a cute romance, a fun, fluffy romance that makes you feel happy inside after reading the book, but if you want to get your heart broken, like I know many other readers who like to read these kinds of books to get their hearts broken, I would really recommend this to you. So this is an adult book, but not because of like explicit scenes, because there isn't any in this book, but this talks about suicide and suicidal thoughts, and like we see a man in a wheelchair who has no hope in life and he doesn't want to live, and that is very like hard on the soul to see and read. I read this when I was quite young, but if you know yourself and you know that you can't read that kind of stuff because I know you're too young or you don't like to read about that stuff, then don't read this book. But I thought this was a very beautifully written book, and it was just heartbreaking. I loved it to bits. I still love it to this day. So the last book on my romance recommendations is Bring It Down the Duke by Evie Dunmore. This is an historical fiction, and I have only read 2 historical romances, and this was one of them. The other one I didn't like so much, but this one, 5 out of 5 stars. I thoroughly enjoyed this one. So this follows a woman who wants to study at Oxford, but at this time not many people studied at Oxford, and there was still a lot of men in society not wanting women to be educated and thinking of them as lesser beings. So we follow her as she finally gets to be at Oxford and study with other women, and the other main character is a duke. And I don't think I have to say much more about this book. They run into each other, like they really run into each other, and we get to see all about how they hate each other and don't like each other, but also they can't stop thinking about each other. And I really enjoyed the aspect of this book that the woman, I can't remember her name right now, but she isn't that wealthy and the duke is a duke. so they can't really marry. But she didn't back down from her own rights. She felt like she didn't want to be anyone's mistress. She wanted to be a wife to someone who loved her for who she was and didn't want to change her and all that stuff. So I really enjoyed that concept of this story, and I really thought that the main character was so strong. So this is an adult book and there's quite a lot of explicit scenes, so just know that before you go into it. But I adored this book. It was so fun and made me want to read so much more of adult historical fiction romances and just, yeah, all about the romance in books. So that was all the romance recommendations I have to share with you today. I still have a lot of books on my shelf that are romances that I want to share with you in the future, so stick around for that if you want to. So I hope that you enjoyed this video, and maybe that you have seen some books that you haven't seen before or heard about before, and maybe added some to your TBR, I don't know. But that's all I have to talk about in this video. Leave a like, a comment below, and subscribe because I post a new video every Thursday, every week. And I will keep doing that and bring all the recommendations, vlogs to you guys every week. So don't forget to stick around if you want to see more. But with that said, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye!